I'm Kyle Licott. Welcome back to another edition, a Friday edition at that of VCTV. We are excited to have you back, our audience, and tuning in today after a week packed full of content. We had double episodes here on VCTV every single day, and today we're coming up to the capstone event. We're going to be talking about what's happening around bio and med tech. Probably going to get into some health tech. We're probably going to get into some deep understandings of what's happening around longevity, maybe some hardware, maybe some software, and again, the infrastructure, both us as infrastructure and also some of the products and services that are being seen out there, and getting into a little bit of the science. Tons to talk about. And all week we've been talking at much more deeper and deeper levels around technology. This is important. Audience, the digitization of everything is here. We've mentioned this almost daily on VCTV. Every industry, everywhere around the world right now is going through digitization. What was once physical is now moving digital. What is digital is expanding. It's becoming efficient, it's being optimized, and it's being automated. This is an exciting world that we are looking towards in the future, and a foundational decade ahead, with all of these technologies playing a role with each other and how they're affecting industries and regions around the world. Again, bio and medtech are no different. And we've brought some of the best and the brightest from around the world to share with us their insights, their thinking, and also their advice to you when you are building or raising in this space. And before I introduce each and every one of them, a big thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in. If you're an investor listening today and you'd like to be on a show like we're talking about today, please do reach out. We host daily episodes and would love to have you on them. Entrepreneurs, this is not just a stage for investors. This is also a stage for you. If you'd like the chance to come and pitch each of us as investors live, along with our entire audience, do reach out. We'd love to have you. There is a stage for you, and you get the chance to do so one-on-one with us. All right? Easy peasy. And if you like what you heard, click subscribe, give us a thumbs up. It's going to be a great show. If you've got questions, drop them in the chat box. We'll do our best to ask them in real time. If not, we're all available 24/7, 365 online, and be happy to continue the conversation. And also a big shout out to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for making VCTV possible every single day on your screen, on your devices, wherever you may be around the world. With that, let's go ahead and get started. We've got some great guests who have come back and are rejoining us on the show. And we've got some new guests who are joining us from new corners of around the world that we haven't visited in a little bit, but really excited to dive in and hear their perspective of where things are going on around this world and these technologies. All right, let's kick it off. Joanne, I apologize. Joanne, welcome to the show. First time guest. I've already messed up your name, but I promise I won't do it again. Welcome, little intro, a little background.
Great, thanks. Thanks for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I think one of the really exciting things about the stuff that I do is I've got a PhD in molecular genetics. So I've been on the academic side for a very long time, and then I transitioned into industry and then clinical healthcare as a whole. And the thing that's been very exciting for me is to be able to see this transition into the digitization of healthcare, which you've just so eloquently spoke about. And so I think I've always been very interested in that intersection between academia, business, and the clinical community, the little triangle of ABCs. And so I've really spent the last 25 years pushing innovations through those different channels. So I'm the general partner of healthcare at IZY Capital, and I'm delighted to be here today. Thank you for your time, and let's hope that we have an interesting discussion.
Oh, well, thank you. We're gonna have an interesting discussion. That background's phenomenal. Also, a real quick question: how did you go from the academia into venture? I mean, being in charge of healthcare at IZY Capital. I mean, this is pretty crazy. This is exciting. How did you make that move?
It is crazy and it is quite exciting, but I'll be very honest with you. I grew up although we're based in London, England, I grew up in North America, Canada primarily, and I did my postdoctoral studies in America. And as you probably are very well aware, you get trained very early to have a slightly commercial brain, I think. So I had founded and exited a couple of companies while I was actually still doing my studies. So I had seen the potential of commercialization, which I often describe as accessibility, not just just making money, for example. And then I've used that and used the different audiences to try to be able to tease out what those different pieces can be put together and look like in order to actually have a successful innovation. It's not always just having a great idea. So I've always kind of been on the cusp of a few of these things. I always say I'm not an expert in any of them. I just kind of put the pieces together to form the triangle. But it's exciting. It's super fun. Yeah.
I love it. This is going to be an awesome Friday episode. If you're tuning in just now, get ready. This is going to be a lot of fun. Joanne, there, I did it twice. I'm sorry. Joanne, welcome to the show. Again, it's a pleasure to have you. Alex, welcome back. It's been a few minutes, a little bit longer maybe, but it's great to have you back here. If you could, a little intro, a little background for those out there who may not know you.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Alex Cater. I'm a principal and managing director of Cater Investment Group. It's a consulting and investment firm based in the U.S. that also operates in Asia. And so basically, my focus here has been on the medtech side, is that I've worked before with in the CDMO space, which for those who don't know are contract development and manufacturing organizations, particularly for biologics entities. So worked on the finance side for those companies in strategic development, supporting their business development focus, running M&A and joint ventures in Asia and the US.
Alex, every time you're on the show, I learn something new about you. I mean, it's like you are this Swiss Army knife that just continues to just shine new tools, and it's amazing. I tease, but I'm serious. So I'm really excited to see and learn more from you this week on this particular arm of your experience. So we'll come back. Anoop, again, it's been a few minutes, but welcome back to the show. It's always a pleasure. If you can, a little intro, a little background.
Thanks, Kyle. A pleasure to be back here again. And speaking about medtech, it's going to be very exciting. And I can see Joanne, Alex have been there with you before as well. It's a very exciting company, Devang, etc. I represent Arias Venture Partners. We're an early stage tech fund based out of India. We are sector agnostic, but health has been one of our focus areas as well. In fact, very recently, one of our lead companies in the first fund called PharmEasy, there's been some news that it just may acquire unicorn status. So I think that's good news for us. And we have another investment, which I'm very excited about, which is, thank you, which is Beto. And that's in the area of chronic care. Not very different. And I'd love to discuss about that with Joanne probably for the benefit of our viewers from, companies like Livongo, Omada, etc. So, which have been in the news recently. So very excited to be here. And I'll throw in my perspective as well, I hope.
Anoop, congratulations. That was really hard to switch back and forth from emojis, by the way. That's way harder than I thought it was. But congratulations.
Thank you so much.
Little clap, a little celebration, and back to clap. There you go.
Thank you so
congratulations on that. That's a huge win for you guys. Excited to talk more about and learn more about those companies as well. And Devang, last but not least, welcome to the show. First time guest here with Elena and I, but it's a little intro, a little background.
Great, thank you. Nice to meet everyone. It's actually my second time, so it's good to be back also. But I am based here in Mumbai, India. I run the health tech vertical at Anthill Ventures. We are a speed scaling ecosystem. So we are a fund accelerator model. We invest in and scale early stage companies at pre-Series A and Series A. And we have a lot of partners, accessibility partners in the healthcare vertical, primarily HCG, which is India's biggest oncology chain. So by extension, we have a lot of interest in early stage detection, cures, genome sequencing, new molecules, proteins, and then adjacencies in cancer. My background, I have educational degrees from both India and the US, an MBA from Carnegie Mellon. I actually did some B2B marketing in the Bay Area. And I've been back in India for a few years. First, I was investing as an angel investor in a personal capacity. And then I've been with Anthill for a little more than 2 years, handling the healthcare vertical. And I love this audience, a really esteemed group of people, and look forward to the discussion.
Absolutely. Me too, buddy. Me too. I mean, I love this. I am the dumbest person in the room, and I'm happy for it right now. This is super exciting. So, guys, let's dive in. My first question to each of your points and your background is what are you seeing currently happening in this space? Right, we have a lot of investors that are tuning in and a lot of entrepreneurs, but would love to hear your thoughts and insights as to what you're seeing happening around bio and medtech currently. And we know what's happened in the past 6 months, but looking at it today and what that can mean going forward, I think is a great way to start this conversation. So, Devang, you were last. I'm going to let you go first. We'll go in reverse order this time, but what are you seeing as the current state of bio and medtech?
Sure. So what we've seen, I mean, from our portfolio, the companies that have already been in health and media tech, they've made some health tech, they've made some quick pivots to, address COVID. So for example, we had a company that had a wound scanner that could be used cut down the time taken by a skilled nurse to measure the parameters of a wound by more than 90%. The market for that is not as big right now. There's a much bigger market for a product they've built out of that, which measures temperature using a smartphone and a thermal scanner. It's being widely adopted in Singapore at things like bus terminals, senior centers, airports, and things like that. So they made a really quick and nifty pivot, and growing rapidly. I mean, thanks to COVID. It's not that we want COVID, but they've managed to pivot in time to address the market. The incoming business plans, they're still seeing a lot of interest in cancer, the digitization, as you said. So a lot of layers of AI and ML on top of processes like mammography or pathology, that aspects of which tend to be pretty manual intensive and can easily be alleviated and mitigated using algorithms. So we're seeing a lot of interest there and a lot of efficiency improvements targeted towards, let's say, entry-level radiologists or entry-level pathologists. We are seeing the usual set of plans come in for cancer, newer molecules, proteins, PD-L1, L3, just new biomarkers for early detection and cure, and alternatives around that. And we are seeing some plans because the whole world is so geared and evangelized towards immunity and things like that, because that's all we've been thinking for 4 or 5 months now. So from an Indian context, there's a lot of focus on Ayurveda, the traditional Indian medicine, and how it affects and improves breathing and lung performance and immunity and things like that. So there are some ideas and plans at the intersection of what I said and Ayurveda. That in a nutshell is what we've been seeing so far.
Wow. It's quite a bit. Very, very exciting. We're going to come back to that in just a moment. But Anoop, to further on that, what are you seeing as kind of the current state? I know you've said you had a few investments, and again, congratulations. But also, what are you seeing as the current state of the markets from bio and medtech?
So I think, look, everyone in this sector has waited for a long time, and I think it has come. The digital first future for healthcare, we've been waiting for it. Much as we've been used to e-commerce in every aspect of our life, whether it was hailing a taxi, solving therefore a commuting problem from point A to point B, resolving that broken experience, to e-commerce, going through loads of clothes and fashion accessories and deciding which one fits us best, and then making that purchase and getting it delivered or having to return to the whole experience. I think the digital first future of healthcare is really here. Virtual care through digital tools has taken off. It was very premature. I think we all remember Google's 2.1 billion bid for Fitbit back in the days, and that all has been eclipsed. It's not about wearables. It's not about one thing or the other. The whole ecosystem is coming together. And this was a very fragmented, still remains, there's a lot of work to be done, but this is a very fragmented experience. Healthcare experience has been broken, I think, in different ways in different parts of the world. Payers are in one plane, there is the providers, there is the doctors, there is the pharmaceutical companies, the diagnostic device. It has been, the consumer trying to find their way through it, right? So all of it is now coming together. The recent merger announcement of Teladoc and Livongo creating a large behemoth And I can see Joanne, nodding to that, and I think she will definitely speak about it. And you must ask her because I'm also wanting to know her point of view about it. But I think that signifies that digital healthcare is here. Investors are certainly going to be, bringing their money purses along, and consumers voting with their feet. They want this delivered, and sooner and later, because this is such an important aspect of our life, and it has been broken for too long. And COVID has brought this to the fore much faster than it would have happened otherwise. We would have simply continued with our lives, because healthcare is all about emergencies, and it's not so much about preventive. But I think now consumers are saying, hey, I want a total solution, and I want to be in control. I want to be empowered with the digital tools to monitor and manage whatever conditions, and everybody is living with those conditions. When I say everyone, it means everyone has families and friends. They're all living with it together. So we're all conscious of it. So we are caregivers in certain cases. We are care receivers in certain cases. And I think this is here to stay. So for investors, it's a great time, and it's the right time to make the moves.
Well,
So
it
I'm
sounds
very
like
bullish.
yeah, and what was a long journey. I mean, coming from a little bit of background in wearables, I mean, it was all wearables. It was all connectivity. It was all that. That was it. Very few people were talking about the data side, to Devang's point, right? What we're going to do with this data, how are we going to monetize it, but also how are we going to even use it in any way, shape, or form? And there were small bits and pieces of the T's, but to your point, there was still so much fragmenting going on of like, well, how are these dots all going to connect together? It was just very, very unclear. And you're bringing up a great point. It is here, and let's hold on the teledoc. I will get there. We'll definitely come back, Alex. Before I get to Joanne here, I want to get your thoughts on the current state of things as well, and what you're seeing from bio and medtech, coming from the Swiss Army knife of a background you have. Where are you seeing this industry kind of shape and go?
Sure. So I'll pivot to a different side of the industry, because I think Joanne will probably touch on what Anup was talking about, and there's a lot to cover there as well. So I'll cover from two different areas. One is from the manufacturing side and production of these large manufacturer of drugs and the pharmaceutical companies, and the second would be on the actual research side. So starting with the research side, there's been a lot of money flowing, of course, into various things, including telehealth, but also in terms of biosimilars and drugs that are going to replace original biologics that are coming off a patent, especially over the next 5 years. So with that being said, there's going to be a lot more innovative drugs that are coming out, ideally cheaper, to treat various types of illnesses that used to cost, up to $10,000 per gram, that now can be more cheaply produced and be more effective. So that's one thing, and that's those innovative companies, or those virtual pharma companies that are working on those different types of therapeutics, are primed to see some M&A from bigger pharmaceutical players in that space, especially as they become more attractive. So that's one of the spaces that we've been working on in terms of from an IT perspective, to help them streamline their IT structure, their QA or quality assurance and quality control structures, data integrity, so that they can be primed for acquisition or being acquired. So that's one part. The second part is that feeds into the available capacity and the manufacturing in order to get these drugs to market. So for people who are aware about the people who manufacture, the companies that manufacture these drugs, the large ones in this sector, of course, are Lonza, Ingelheim, Samsung Biologics, and a number of other names. They're not the the table talk names that you hear about, because they're behind the scenes and they're supporting the originator drug developers like the Abbotts, the Mercks of the world. But there's been a lot of consolidation, particularly in that space, with acquiring new facilities and expansion. particularly with new markets that are coming online, including China, which has been largely a small market up until now and until recently, and then regulations globally that are actually impacting how drugs are being made, where they're being produced. So what I think you can see is that the CDMO market, particularly as well as the innovative market, you'll see a lot more expansion. There will be a lot more things coming out, because particularly because of where we are with COVID right now, that there's been a big shift of drugs, and there's been a need for excess capacity, which won't be able to be met in the next 5 years. So that's definitely going to raise additional revenue opportunities on those for these companies as they try to address the drugs that are coming out in the near future.
And you bring up a good point around the patents and protections running out on certain drugs. We've seen some very foundational companies launched because of that, right? Taking advantage of those opportunities as the patents run out on certain drugs, they become generic, they formalize their own unique version of them, and boom, they explode into very good companies that enter into new markets, right? We saw this with Hims and Hers, we saw this with Romans, we saw this with many other companies in the similar space that opened up this whole area of pharmaceuticals and over-the-counters that once really were just so protected and so expensive, and now brought to a more reasonable level as well. So great point, Joanne. Everyone's teed it up for you.
Well, this is the difficult thing because everyone's already said all the great things. So I'm
taking notes. Don't worry, I'm taking notes. If we need to come back to anything, don't worry.
Great. Okay. So I think for me, as I said, I've been in this space for a really long time. And I think what has delighted me the most is we're obviously in a very unfortunate situation that we're experiencing a global pandemic, but that has actually accelerated not just innovation, because I think we've had a lot of innovation in this space for a long time. It's accelerated the adoption of it. And what I've seen is that there are companies now that are much more collaborative. They realize that, yes, there's more than enough to go around, and actually having a piece of that end-to-end pathway is actually just as valuable as trying to build it yourself. We've seen so many companies fail because they think they need to have that whole value prop between the beginning and the end. And this is classic when it comes to healthcare. So people think if they need to do some sort of a decision support tool, they need to have a consent module, they need to do genomic analysis, they need to do the whole entire thing wrong, which is why they failed. Now they're seeing that actually doing something really well in isolation and having particular partnerships is actually much more fruitful. So I'm delighted to see that, because that's actually accelerating the adoption of these innovations. The other thing that I'm seeing more of, which again is, I think, quite fundamental to the way that we're going to see healthcare evolve, is the fact that the focus is not on treating the sick people. Yes, there are a lot of sick people today that need to be helped, but actually the most important thing for a healthcare system and a healthcare economy is to have prevention as key to that. So how do we get people to start taking care of themselves better? How do we make sure that insurers are actually paying for the proper tests and monitoring patients? And how does that whole ecosystem shift from going to a hospital physically to be treated because you're sick to not being sick in the first place and to be monitored? So there's a whole raft of tools now coming out that is available for remote monitoring. And I think, again, the pandemic has highlighted that, consent to have people looking at data or sharing data is not some weird, creepy, scary thing. Consent for people to look at data and to share it is extremely helpful. We're seeing that now, obviously, with respect to trends and patterns. It's the exact same thing with healthcare data. So if you were to think, so I've seen a couple of these examples that we've been actually quite actively involved in. So just to give you a flavor of this. So as I said previously, my background is in genomics. I've always spent quite a lot of time being very interested in that space. And while the genome is just one extra data point, for example, it can actually help with a lot of predictive analysis. So if an individual has a rare disease, but you don't know they have a rare disease, you will treat them 100, 150 different times. That's a lot of money. And not just a lot of money for the healthcare system or the insurer, This is a human being who has to go in and out of the hospital 150 times. That is just not cool. So if you look at the genome, for example, and you can see that in advance, sometimes these people being treated very early on, they will never get sick. So the healthcare benefit of that and the value of that individual to society is actually quite high. So we're seeing a bigger move to people trying to allow disease to be identified earlier, and then not just be like, oh yeah, sucks that you've got this condition, have fun with that, but then to actually implement steps along the way to be able to monitor and prevent the progression of disease. And this is where it gets really interesting, because I still think, I've said this for years now, and maybe one day I'll be right, who knows, but I still think that we're at the cusp of actually flipping the insurance industry on its head. It is far too expensive for insurers to pay for tests that don't need to be done. It is much cheaper for them to say, a full workup. It doesn't have to be, whole genome sequencing and loads of other omics work, but what can they possibly do to uncover any sort of underlying disease that can be prevented and monitored so that you actually are the healthiest possible version of you. And you can see, I won't mention particular companies, but you can see some big healthcare companies in the space, big data companies, trying to understand what that looks like. And for me, this actually opens up a huge amount of opportunities from some of these smaller players, because they've been doing this in isolation for the monitoring of Parkinson's disease, for example. Great companies are looking at gait analysis, so you can tell when someone gets up from the couch if they are a little bit slower than they were the day before, or whether they're walking. You can tell how they're actually progressing. So that piece of information is helpful, I suppose. But what if you could have predicted that 20 years before? And was that because the person had committed? So there's lots of these things that are happening. And I think, again, going back to the collaborative aspect of it, a lot of these companies, I think, thought they had to have that end-to-end solution, and they were just, trying to boil the ocean. It was never going to really work. And so now seeing them either having some collaborative endeavors to actually push these opportunities forward is hugely successful. And again, if you start to try to raise smaller amounts of money to do your piece of the puzzle better, this is where it's going to be a huge amount of success. So I think for me, the real shift towards wellness and prevention is much more apparent than it has been previously. And I think, going back to some of the comments about manufacturing and drugs, there's absolutely no point in manufacturing and producing drugs if you don't know who's going to benefit from them. So the two of them go hand in hand. And, being able to implement some of these pharmacogenomic opportunities in pharmacies, for example, I'm not going to go in and buy paracetamol if it's never going to work for me. If I'm one of those people that's a non-responder, why would I take it? So people are becoming much more demanding about their own healthcare. They want to be active about it. They want to be in control as to who's going to see it, what's it going to be used for, and what that value chain looks like. And I think with all of the advances in cloud computing and open APIs, we're seeing a real shift towards empowering the individual to have that. And also, individuals are now really demanding the healthcare system to offer them superior, precise healthcare as opposed to just generic healthcare. And again, this goes back to that impetus with insurance as well. How can you actually ensure that the individual, it's going to be the healthiest possible version of them? You need to treat them and you need to prevent them from getting sick to begin with. So loads in this space, which is quite exciting.
You did a great job. I mean, everyone teed you up and you were a rock star. And to that point, Anoop, we were kind of trashing for a moment on wearables and how it's no longer just about them, right? It's the convergence of everything. And to Joanne's point, it's very true. I mean, wearables, the Fitbits in the early days and the Apple Watches of the world really help provide, I would argue, not just education, but also kind of an ease of understanding around that data and what that data can mean, how to share it, why not to share it, what should you share it with or not. But then also sitting in the middle, and Joanne, to your point, of wanting to be healthier, right? Wanting to be something a little bit different, and then also understand more about yourself. So all of these things, I think you're all bringing it to the same point. It's the convergence. We're finally here, Joanne. I'll give you all the credit. To your point, you are right. We are at that tipping point, but we are really at a convergence of all these areas just coming together in a very, very big way, which is exciting. But there's still a lot of questions for us as investors, and then also for the entrepreneurs, right? Where are the areas of opportunity? How do you diligence a company when looking at them in these spaces? There's a lot to talk about here. around these. So, I want to real quick touch on the teledoc mentioning as Anoop brought up, but then I want to come around and talk a little bit about opportunities and diligence, because there's a lot more here to get into than just the surface. So teledoc, is this the next thing? Are we seeing the foundation of what we're going to be doing for in terms of telemedicine here in the coming future, or is this just the beginning to something more, or just a blip on the scale? So Joanne and Anoop, I'll let you two kind of take it away. I mean, Joanne, we'll let you go first since you went last. Where do you see this big merger and this big conglomerate kind of coming together? And then Alex Devang, I'll come to you for further comments.
So I personally think it's a very good thing for many reasons. Number one, it's big enough that can actually be socialized. These very small companies that are trying to do it locally, hats off to them, fantastic, keep doing all that great work. We do need local innovation as well. But this actually is, we're talking about it. Everybody's talking about it. It's a big enough deal that it can actually have a lot of impact. And as we all know, sometimes someone has to come into this space and they just have to absolutely blow it out of the water. Even if this is not the model that we follow in the future, what it's doing is creating pathways. And I think that's hugely important for that particular reason. The one thing that I think is going to be a struggle is that the regulatory environment, which is also always a very problematic thing in policy, how do we keep up with that? What is the legal implication for some of these things? We're building the airplane as we're flying it right now. So we're kind of creating it as we go. And I think that is where I think a lot of innovation does end up slowing down, is because people can move very fast, but can regulations and policies keep up with them? So that's my only worry, is that it's going to be a space that is going to be moving at a colossal speed, don't get me wrong, but I think it's only a big player like this that can actually do that, because if it's going to move fast and it's going to come against a lot of these different issues, at least it's going to clear the pathway for the other companies coming behind them. So I think it's positive, personally.
We need someone to do that. Anoop, Alex Devang, anything else to add on that? Is telemedicine our future ahead, and is this the company to lead the charge, or anything else to add?
Yeah,
Anoop,
so let me try and venture something over from our side. I think this is a great move. It combines virtual care with patient engagement tools. Consumers have never been empowered participants in their own healthcare process when all they've wanted is control over the process that leads to improved health outcomes. So the spend in the industry, which is the spend made by the consumer, directly or indirectly, whether it's coming from the insurer or whether it's out of pocket, it's all been without this feeling of empowerment that I'm in control, right? And what's the outcome that I'm being driven towards? What's the data on it? Has that been converted into actionable insights, right? And can someone tell me what's the right thing to do at the right time so I can prevent a major catastrophe as far as health is concerned? And I think Joanne spoke about that. Can you see something 10 years before? So I think that's what the merger, the companies are bringing to the table as a whole to consumers. And we picked up on these signals in India as well. We know that chronic diseases take up a large share of the healthcare spend in any country. I see a number of some 400 billion in the US behind chronic conditions, diabetes, hypertension, mental health, and so on, weight management, and all of that. I see the number $14 billion in India, and similar big numbers in China or anywhere else in the world. And that's why we invested in a company called Vito. And this is empowering diabetics, much on the lines of Livongo, to actually empower themselves with a proprietary cell phone-based IoT device, if I can call it, which is an IoT-based glucometer. It connects you to the cloud-based platform in your phone, and you can monitor your blood sugar. It connects with your Google Fit or your Fitbit, so it keeps track of how many steps and how many heart points have you gained today for the brisk activity that you were supposed to do. If it's 150 heart points, which the American Heart Association prescribes for you, as Google Fit says, has that been achieved for you? where is your medical adherence? We know that medical adherence has a big role to play in the management of these conditions. Ordering of medicines, ordering of low GI products, ordering a diagnostic test for your key organs functions like kidneys and lungs, etc., liver function tests, etc., ordering them at the right time. Where do you get that actionable insights to take the right decision, to hit the button at the right time? We often forget to do things and then things go worse. So this is the journey that digital therapeutics, digital engagement tools like Beto or Livongo have really brought to the table. And I think it's empowering consumers, and that's why insurers, that's why patients really like it. Nobody wants to land up in a hospital if they can avoid it, right? By taking some simple steps at the right time. And that's what they're helping them do. But if in case you need that, then you've got a virtual care platform like Teladoc to help you to connect with experts, clinicians, write out the right prescription. Every time we have met a doctor, and that's when, something like as ordinary as a flu breaks out in a change of season anywhere else in the world, anywhere in the world, kids start falling sick because they're going to school, they catch it from each other. When we go to a doctor, they almost always ask the same set of questions. So it is highly programmable. It is highly automation, oriented. If you put that on a platform, Uberize, if I may call it, use that term, clinicians and healthcare professionals so that they can be free to do these, at the time when a consumer desires it without having to make the commute, because you're going to ask the same questions. Today, we are, as investors, all of us are talking to founders and we are writing millions of dollars of checks on a Zoom call. Nobody's shaking hands with anyone, right? It's happening. So if business worth billions of dollars can be done, I'm sure empowered with the right digital therapeutic tools, the right management tools, and the right virtual care platform, a marriage of the two, which is what Teladoc and Livongo has done, can certainly bring about a revolution in this era of, and bring about this era of digital first healthcare. So I think it's all good. And and we as investors, we've certainly invested in the chronic side of it, seeing the
And that's, I think, a perfect segue. Alex, oh, sorry, go ahead, Alex, if you have a further comment.
No, go ahead.
Okay, I was just going to say that's a perfect segue into my next question, which, Alex, I'm coming to you first on. So you can hold on answering this question and give your comment if you want, but I want to talk diligence. I mean, this is all great and wonderful, but how do you diligence and look at these companies from an investor perspective, right? How do you go under the hood and actually look to see that what is being said is there, right? It's not, in one argument, it's not a traditional company that you would look for the similar data room, the similar structure, the similar checkbox of diligence. Instead, there's a lot more. So I'll let you choose which question to answer first.
Yeah, I guess I'll try to tie them in together. I think that answering that question, it's based on data. I mean, when you're dealing with the data rooms, you're looking for the actual data that's being gathered, and that hasn't always been. It's existed, but it hasn't necessarily been used to draw key insights that are going to be actionable and actually going to have value. And so you have to do the test about what the platform is. Is it actually doing what it needs to do or what it claims to do is accurate? And that's done through forcing trials and actually gathering that data to make sure that it's actually sustainable and that it integrates with other platforms or other devices that are going to be strengthen its use case and the addressable population. So that's one key part of it. And then talking about that in terms of how do you get to addressability, the potential of the market, and that sizing. I think that both Joanne and Anoop brought up a good points about there's it's great, right? We're talking about a convergence of an ecosystem that we've had all of these individual parts, but now that's starting to converge together in many different ways. And we should expect to see that moving forward. And then for established economies, there's a good opportunity to actually look at how adoption is going to be driven. And it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. On the public side, particularly if you're looking at public expenditures into emerging markets, particularly, and I'm thinking about USAID and the US government and Australian government as examples, they've been doing work on this, or at least in terms of directionally on this, and trying to use this type of solution to address, to track different diseases, chronic diseases in economies for some time. And now with new solutions like this, it provides the opportunities to do it more effectively, to see that more public expenditures coming into that. Now, the challenge though that exists, particularly in this space and applying it to different economies, different countries, is the legislative and regulatory barriers to sharing information and the ability to leverage that in order to gain those insights. And not only that is one part, but also the adoption of this technology as well, which will also still be something to look for in the US as well. So I think that it's really interesting to see. I think that you can see a lot more opportunities coming into it from the public and personal side of things, because both of those are revenue streams for it, and both of those feed into ultimate valuations. But they're the key part, and one of the hardest things to look at, and I think Anoop used the term Uberize. The challenge of that when you talk about just Uber, which is a great business model, is that there's always been hurdles to get over in terms of being able to tap into that full potential. And that's definitely the case in the health industry.
Yeah, no doubt. And Devang, I see you unmuted as well, and I was coming to you next. So same question to you. Anything else to add? But also, where do you see diligence, and how can people really get under the hood of some of these companies to understand if it's a good investment for them?
Sure, I think for diligence, if you just look at the whole expanse of startups, I think roughly 30% of diligence is the same or similar across startups in terms of the pedigree of the founding team, how they met, the bonding, academic backgrounds, patents, defensibility, moats, all that definitely applies. I think what's harder in health tech, or at least deep biotech, is that once you go into exactly what a biomarker or molecule does, it's usually either you're a medical expert, or you have academic credentials in that direction, or you need a healthcare partner, which in our case is India's biggest oncology chain, to help validate the technology and its its applicability, its defensibility, its how the market size, how easy it is to get a beachhead, things like that. It's not as obvious as some other, let's say a B2B tech, which is usually a bit easier to understand. That's how I would say. I think the diligence is also, and that's why we've adopted a fund accelerator model. Is like we like to start working with the companies as advisors in the accelerator, and that helps us understand the company at length over a few months, as opposed to 3-4 meetings and making an investment decision. I think it's much harder in biotech. Even if you take a portfolio approach, which everyone's doing, investments in in biomarkers, in molecules, in adjacencies. Even then, even with a portfolio approach, you really need to know a company much better and get a technology validated by luminaries and experts before making decisions. So the diligence is much more onerous, much more detailed, and much more technical than most other areas of the startup ecosystem.
And then Joanne and Anoop, a question for you before we get to the lightning round here. Opportunities. We've kind of touched on a few of these throughout today's points and conversations, but where are the opportunities for investors if they're looking to get into this space? Where should they start? Where should they be looking? What's kind of the hot sector that's starting to rise that they should be paying attention to? And also kind of doubles up for entrepreneurs building in this space, right? Where should they be focusing on? Where should they be looking towards? So where are those areas of opportunities? And Joanne, we'll start with you.
Sure. So I think really a great segue from the last discussion point really is that there's a lot in that, as I said, the end-to-end pathway, but a lot of the companies that are wanting to specifically hone in on a particular area, there's a lot of expertise needed in that. So with respect to anything to do with prevention, anything to do with digital biomarkers, anything that can be done remotely is quite important as well. It doesn't just have to be GP appointments, for example. It's how can you actually start to collect data. And I think one of the biggest things, especially going back to the diligence part, is it's very difficult to do diligence on companies if data is not in the same format. So while it's super, super boring, there's a whole business plan that can be put together for a lot of these companies, and a whole lot of opportunities for standardization of data. And I know it's super boring, but well, actually, I'm sure some people think it's super exciting, so I shouldn't say that. But there's a whole opportunity, I think, for data standardization, data connectivity, open APIs, various different ways of identification. We're going to find this over and over again. And it's that aggregation piece that I think is hugely important. And it's not just putting all of this together to have discrete units. It's how is that going to get fed back to the individual, the healthcare system, the insurer, various different things like that. So it's having a discrete opportunity is very important. How that fits to the next piece in the puzzle and how that result is going to be fed back, whether it's your Fitbit result integrated with your menstrual cycle or whatever it is. What is it and how is that going to be connected? So I think the value proposition is people who can actually see that there's more than just their discrete unit, but it has to be connected in some way, and there has to be an element of return of information that's relevant.
Spot on. Anoop, anything to add?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is virtual care, or we call it telehealth, but delivering virtual care to patients in any domain, any segment. I think that's bound to grow. So whether it's women's health, whether it's mental health, whether it's family health, even at the primary level, or whether it's chronic digital care, all of that is bound to grow. I think the companies that investors are looking for or would like to look for is finally creation of value with a moat around it. And the creation of value happens when you've got a full stack model. You can't do things halfway. You've got to trap the data. You've got to analyze it for insights. It's got to convert into actions for the consumer and for various stakeholders in the process, right? And then you got to see and measure the outcome. And I agree with Joanne that the metrics and the language that you've got to see, it's got to be similar. It can't be a different set of numbers that are not comparable to what's happened 20 years ago in this field. And therefore, you can't have a discussion about it. And you're trying to establish your own nomenclature. That's not going to work. So when we, for example, did a due diligence on Beto, which was into chronic care, or is rather into chronic care, we looked at the improved outcomes for diabetics. We saw what the platform has done for those who were using the platform. Did they have an improved blood sugar post and preprandial? And we saw that happening. We saw the monthly active users. We compared the number of times the platform was urging those consumers on the platform to go out and measure their blood sugar. It was more than the WHO numbers of how many times an average diabetic in the world actually measures their sugar as they ought to be, which means that they were engaged with the platform. And we could correlate that with the outcomes. Now, if you have that in front of you, now that's a clear sign of a net promoter score. And sure enough, this company scored a net promoter score, which was cracking the charts. So it means organic customer acquisition can happen. And finally, therefore, a sustainable business model where you're not spending constantly to acquire and reacquire consumers. Because in healthcare, if you've delivered a good deal to someone, they will definitely speak to more than 18 people about it, right? And they will bring in large numbers of people because families look after health together because we're all looking after each other's health. Sometimes we also raise a glass saying, to your health. So it's always very social. Health has always been a very social topic. We're all concerned about it. We all wish each other health. And we get very concerned in a very social way. It's not a very individual thing. So I think this whole space is growing. It's viral. It's here to stay. But we need to, as investors, look for companies which create those outcomes. And finally, that's got to be correlated with something that the company is bringing to the table uniquely with a moat around it.
Anoop, you bring up something, a very good point that actually has not been brought up around this topic, and that healthcare or health is so social, right? We cheers to it, we talk about it, we're concerned for everybody, we're concerned for ourselves. And, you know, there's certain parts that are very private, but for the most part, it's actually very public, and we do socialize and talk about it and refer, which kind of goes back to a point both Joanne and Alex and Devang all made around, you know, the sharing of the data. And it's kind of interesting how we're very reserved for so long on sharing data when we're happy to talk about it and we're happy to socialize and happy to refer. And so that'll be a very interesting paradigm to see how we shift in the coming years as we do look towards, you know, a more connected, a more remote, in other cases, healthcare system, and also just in general around medicine throughout the world. Very exciting. So guys, we are at the top of the hour. I want to come to you for the lightning round here and get your closing thoughts on kind of where the industries are going to go in the next, you know, 3 to 5 years. And, you know, maybe even stretch it because we are in biotech and we know that it takes a little bit longer. So here in the next decade, where do you see bio and medtech really moving forward over this next decade? And Devang, let's start with you. Where do you see things moving forward here in your closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think what you said at the start of the webinar, I think, you know, rapid digitization of healthcare and health tech combined with, you know, great personalization, you know, the segment of one, as it's called in marketing, you know, completely personalized healthcare driven by genome sequencing, layers of AI and ML on all aspects of pathology, you know, for example, mammography and things like that. I think these will all lead to, it will upend the industry to a great extent. I think there'll be significant disruption. And what COVID has done is it's really had us think a lot and evangelize us to, you know, being healthy, preempting and preventing disease, and looking at disease from all aspects of it, even from the direct disease prevention to cures to adjacency. So I think a lot of business plans will emanate from these macro trends, and we'll see unicorns emerging from deep tech. The intersection of technology with biology will become, I say, there'll be more interplay in that. So tech will play a harder role, much bigger role in the picture. We'll see some different business models. We've traditionally seen biotech as, you know, trying to create a new drug, and that is, it's pretty binary. It's either a 0 or a 1. Either you reach phase 2 and get acquired by big pharma for 10 billion, or you fail. You know, it's, and you a lot of biotech firms these days are SaaS platforms with AI and ML for analyzing some data like genetic data. It has a more traditional SaaS approach to revenue and, you know, feasibility and patch to profitability and growth. So I think investors will be cognizant of these different business models and will adapt to these new trends in biotech.
And I agree. And where can everyone find you online if they want to connect and continue the conversation?
Sure, you can find me, my first name Devang at anthillventures.com. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. If you just do Devang Mehta Anthill, there's just one of me at Anthill, so you'll find me there. Happy to connect, happy to discuss your plan, happy to discuss any other way of collaborating around health tech. Thanks.
Wonderful. Anoop, same to you. Closing thoughts, and where can everyone find you?
Thanks, Kyle. So I think I'm going to say something a little bit bolder. So the last 10 years was that of e-commerce. Now that's a done story. It's going to keep on expanding. But I think the next 5 years is going to belong to healthcare in a big way. We're already seeing that happen all across the world, and there couldn't have been a moment as now. Fortunately or unfortunately, we all know that it's one thing that has affected all of us around the world, no matter where we come from, and that's the pandemic. It's brought health to the fore, and that is going to make us sit up and take notice of our health like never before. It has also raised new dimensions, like mental health has become extremely important in recent times as all of us cope with the new new normal, as I say. I think it's not the new normal. We're sort of wishing it away, but it's a whole lot of abnormality in it, right? So there's a whole lot of things going on over here. So I think the next 5 years, watch out for health tech. This is the space to be in. There's a lot of rules that are going to be broken. There's a lot of ecosystem players that are going to come together digitally, and there's going to be a lot of opportunities for investors and founders and startups alike. Thanks.
Attaboy.
Yeah,
and you can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah, I was gonna say, first off, I love the boldness. I mean, you just 1-2 punched everybody right there. But where can everyone find you online?
You can find me on LinkedIn, and yeah, every month or so, you can find me talking to Kyle.
There you go. Shameless plug for VCTV, everybody. I appreciate it, Anoop, and thank you, Devon. Alex, closing thoughts.
Sure. I mean, I think that what has been said has been great. And moving on in this space, what's going to be a key component is social health, right? Using health as a social platform, because we've seen best practices if we talk about the pandemic in terms of tracing. Of course, that's relevant now, but in terms of how do you share the data and how do you share achievements and how well you're doing in terms of health goals, preventative health will also be something that can be used and potentially even rewarded with the insurance companies that are looking for ways in order to incentivize people to share that data willingly. So that could be something that's also a big part, as we see that in a number of other industries and is commonplace in other countries right now. Please reach out to me. I'm usually on LinkedIn. You can find me at Alex Cater or at caterinvestments.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. Joanne, close us out.
Yes, so I'll try not to repeat too much what others said. I think where we're seeing it really moving is that citizens are demanding better types of healthcare. It's not necessarily someone wanting to wait in a queue for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or 4 months to try to get in to see a doctor. There are a lot of technologies now that can be done faster and better than human beings. We all get tired. There's a lot of human error. So I think people are trying to understand that, yes, there are always going to be flaws in machines as well as people, but what's the most robust way to actually accelerate detection of disease, treatment of disease, and ultimately prevention of disease. So I think we'll see citizens demanding more of that, but that also gets flipped the other way around, which means citizens need to be willing to open up some personal information and be able to share that willingly. So my plea is to be able to think a little bit more openly when it comes to sharing information, what that looks like, and remembering that your data point, it can actually go a long way in helping a lot of others. So it's not, as we said before, social health is actually a very important thing. So let's each of us do our part to not just make ourselves healthier, but the rest of the world as well. And you can find me on LinkedIn as well, Joanne Hackett, also on Twitter, Joanne Hackett00.
Wonderful. All, thank you so much for all the insights. As I said, I was taking notes the entire time. I did learn a ton. And to your audience, I hope you learned a bunch as well. And as all of our investors and panelists said, they're available 24/7, 365 online or via email, as some of them gave out. So feel free to reach out, connect, and even share a little bit of what you're building or challenge them on their bold predictions, which I believe as well are pretty right on. So all, again, thank you so much for joining today and sharing your insights. To your audience, thank you again for tuning in. If you like what you heard today, make sure you click subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Also, feel free to reach out. We'd love to hear from you if you'd like to be on a show like today as investors or as an entrepreneur to pitch us your idea and to our live audience as well. Thank you, Anoop. And also a big shout out and thank you to Elena and to the entire LA Token team for making VCTV possible every single day here for you, anywhere in the world on any device you may be watching. I'm Kyle Lacotte, your host. Again, thank you, guests. You can find me, thank you, Joanne. You can find me online on all social media at Kyle Ellicott. Super easy. If not, look in the show notes, it's right there. Looking forward to seeing you next week. We'll be back here with a full packed week of multiple episodes, more and more and more insights from investors around the world on what's happening in technology, regions, and industries around the world. I'm Kyle Lacotte, your host. for VCTV. See you back here next week. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.